and there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to a tremendous day on the program. From very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. My friends, a fond farewell. That's right, my friends. Oh, what a beautiful day it is on the program. Nancy Pelosi has announced that she is not going to seek re-election.
So you played the 1812 overture in kind of recognition of how long she's been in Congress?
Yeah, her birthday. Yeah, her actual birth date.
1812.
Yeah, well, actually, honestly, it doesn't really matter what you think of Nancy Pelosi. She's been in Congress for 40 years. 40 in the House of Representatives. And, all right, so maybe she's the best argument in the world for term limits. But the question is, how for 40 years did she, baffle her constituents? How did she con them into voting for her that many times?
San Francisco.
Well, yeah, but even in San Francisco, you got to think that there's somebody that would recognize the idiocy that is Nancy Pelosi. Well, and okay, so maybe I should, that's a little unfair, because for Nancy Pelosi, somebody as that radical to stay in office for 40 years and really not have a viable opponent the entire time can't really be an imbecile. I mean, definitely a radical leftist Democrat, but still 40 years convincing people to vote for her, even though she was by far one of the biggest dangers to our country. I mean, it was Nancy Pelosi that got through Obamacare. It was Nancy Pelosi that got through the the Affordable Care Act. Yep. That was Obamacare. I mean, just think about all of the dangerous things, the damaging things that she put through the House of Representatives. Think of what she did to the country for 40 years.
You think her successor is going to be any better?
Well, actually, I have some thoughts about that. Sometimes if you have a rotten, terrible, dangerous politician and they retire or they're beaten or, they're not in office anymore. Well, the person that comes in after them, 9 times out of 10 is not going to be nearly as effective as their predecessor. And so, even though you may have a lunatic in there, they're not going to have the connections. They're not going to, know how the whole place works. So, it's kind of the silver lining to the dark rain cloud that, all right, so you still got a radical Democrat, but it's not Nancy Pelosi. So fond farewell, Nancy. Go back to your husband and leave us the heck alone. Now, I do have a couple of replacements that might be in the pipeline for good old Nancy. Jackson Walker and Claire McFarland of the Cow Pie. Now, I know what you're thinking. They're not all that interested in running for office, but they are interested in campaigning for it. from the Cowboy, a ridiculous article entitled "The Wyoming Freedom Caucus Membership Survey. 31 House reps say they're not members." My first response to this is, who really gives a crap? What does it matter? Well, I'll tell you who gives a crap is Jackson Walker and Claire McFarland, who, by the way, must be card-carrying members of the Democrat Party. And if they are not, those two, definitely one of them, is a leader in the Democrat redcoat establishment in Wyoming. You need no further evidence that the media is completely made up of solid redcoats and or Democrats. Well, they're probably all redcoats because they all know that if they're a registered Democrat in the state of Wyoming, they really can't vote in any primary that really matters at all. And so they all join the Republican Party. And that way, they can claim that their writing is in some way reflective of whatever actually happens in this state, but not in this case. And let me tell you why they wrote this piece. Because they think that the media, that is, they think that they've been so successful in getting negative connotations attached to the words Freedom Caucus. And if they can tie somebody to the Freedom Caucus, well, then that paints a big red target on their back. And maybe there's some truth to that. There is a sign, or at least there was, I haven't paid much attention to it, out on 5th Street as I'm going home, one of the little campaign signs, and it says the Freedom Caucus is corrupt. Now, if you get close enough to it, it's obvious that the thing has been kicked a couple times. Not by me. I wouldn't lower myself to such partisan activities. I'm sure it wasn't Agent 29. He didn't even know about the sign until I told him. But it's clear that somebody stopped there, and it's right along a busy street in Sheridan. So, to pull over on the side is kind of perilous. But anyway, it's obvious some people have kicked it. Well, it's an example of trying to say that these people are the Freedom Caucus, that is, they are so radical that they are a danger to the country. Now, listen to how Claire McFarland and Jackson Walker characterize the members of the Freedom Caucus. Now, just listen to this. This is fantastic. Quote, let's see here. The Freedom Caucus, or say, it's been known for championing property tax cuts. All right, we're good with that. Pro-life laws, absolutely good with that. It is a bad thing to kill babies, Claire McFarland. You should know that, having several of them of your own. And here's the last part. You ready for this? Transgender bathroom and sports restrictions. According to the Cowboy, that is what the Freedom Caucus is known for. It doesn't have anything to do with guns. It doesn't have anything to do with maybe not using your tax dollars to benefit rich people in other states. It doesn't have anything to do with reducing the size of the government, nor does it have anything to do with any other conservative policy, like maybe making sure that illegal aliens aren't getting government benefits in the state of Wyoming. Maybe trying to get a handle on people who don't speak English driving down the road. Maybe it could be getting a handle on reducing the power of the governor. Maybe it could be streamlining our election process to get to make sure that it's more secure. Maybe it could be any of those things, but not according to the Cowboy. Nope. That's transgender bathroom and sports restrictions. It's absolutely ridiculous.
I think it's okay that they say that too, because most of the people that I talk to, whether they say it out loud or not, happen to agree with our stance.
That's because most people have common sense and they don't work for the Cowboy. Now here's another thing too. Who owns the Cowboy? Well, it's a guy named B. Wayne Hughes, and he maintains over and over that he is a conservative. You don't have no idea how many people I've run into in Jackson, which is where Hughes lives. When he's not off on his jet somewhere, that tell me he has claimed that he's a conservative. You cannot be a conservative and run a publication, and in all fairness, he doesn't run it. Jimmy Orr does. But you can't own a publication like the Cowboy and claim that you're a conservative. The two are incongruous. And, I mean, so are Jackson Walker and Claire McFarland, too, by the way. But they go on. Quote, the Freedom Caucus website identifies 16 members, combining the website with interviews the Cowboy State Daily conducted this week with Republican state House delegates. 17 representatives identify themselves as Freedom Caucus members. 3 more gave uncertain answers, like Representative Steve Johnson. Well, I have a lapel pin. Now, obviously, if you have a lapel pin, according to the logic of the Cowboy State Daily, then you must be a member of the Freedom Caucus. Or others, with J.R. Riggins. So I'll answer, quote, I'll answer your question with a question. What does my voting record say? Well, to be fair, JR, your voting record doesn't say a whole heck of a lot because you had a heart surgery. But the votes that he did get to participate in, yeah, he was pretty conservative. But the point is, why does it matter? Well, it's because the media thinks that they've been able to successfully paint a target on the back of Freedom Caucus members. And maybe they have to some extent with the more radical members of the Democrat Party, the Democrat redcoat establishment, I guess is what we should call it. But I have another question. Well, I guess before we get there, Ken, do you have the graphic of what Darren McCann sent to him?
Don't have it readily available.
Ah, it's too bad. It was funny. Darren McCann sent, let's see here, replied with a meme from Joe Rogan that says, let me see if I can find it here. Where is it?
Yeah, they quoted it in the article.
Yeah, I'm looking through it here, but it's actually kind of funny. Basically,
but after the quote, there was a little sentence that was added that said, this has been approved by the D.C. overlords for release.
Well, all right. So the media in Wyoming thinks that they've really uncovered something here. They have been able to unmask the evil Freedom Caucus, the people that want to cut your taxes and make sure you can pack your gun around wherever you want. They think that they've really got a bombshell on their hands. Now, there's another side of this, and you know, some may want to. Did you find the graphic?
Yeah, I just wanted to read the text on it, which they did quote in the article, I think. But he says, a rule that will save your sanity. This is Joe Rogan. Stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. They don't want clarity. They want conflict. Every explanation becomes ammunition. Every defense becomes evidence. Save your energy for people actually listening.
Exactly right.
Not everyone deserves your defense. And then the little deal underneath there, approved by the D.C. overlords for distribution. So Darren, good on you for sending that to him, and I'm glad that they quoted that.
Yeah, well, you know, they didn't really go too much, didn't discuss Agent 29 very much because he's been pretty open about the whole thing. Not that it really matters. Now, the other side of this, I think, is instructive for, you know, more conservative members of the House of Representatives, friends of the program, I might say, or people that associate with the Freedom Caucus and up until now have said that, you know, I'd really rather you not disclose, you know, that I'm a member of the Freedom Caucus. Your answer really should be something like, you're darn right I am, and why aren't you supportive of them? What is it about freedom that you despise? What is it about reducing the tax burden on people that is so terrible? How about why don't you explain to me why killing babies is a good thing? Because it's not. I mean, Claire, as I mentioned before, Claire McFarland should know that that's probably a good thing for elected representatives to support. I mean, why try to defend a losing position? Instead, what you should do is put it back on them and absolutely own it. You're right, I am. Here's why. Why don't you agree with that? Why do you want to raise people's taxes? Why do you want to kill little babies? Why do you want to deprive people of their constitutional right to carry a gun? Why is it, Claire McFarland and Jackson Walker, that you think those things are bad? That's the article that you should be writing, and I hope you do write it. By the way, Claire McFarland, Jackson Walker, if you think being a member of the Freedom Caucus is a bad thing, and by the way, I don't defend everything that the Freedom Caucus does, even though my producer happens to be one of their members. I don't know. Do you even call yourselves members? I mean, do you have like a membership card?
You know, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it.
Do you have a secret handshake?
I'm not authorized to disclose such information.
Do you have meetings in the cloakroom?
Not authorized to disclose such information.
Do we even have a cloakroom?
Not authorized to disclose such information.
See, the point is, it doesn't matter. The only reason it matters to the media is they think it helps out the Democrat redcoat establishment's electoral prospects. That's why they wrote that article.
I liked J.R. Riggins' reaction. It's too bad it had to be J.R. because
I know.
he was ill and missed a bunch of votes. But yeah,
Deathly ill, by the way.
judge people on their votes, and they want to say, okay, we all vote in a block. Well, no more so than the other side does.
Exactly. You don't think the Wyoming caucus had a block?
You start looking at the conservatives as a whole, and there's quite a bit of diversity there. Certainly as much as the other side. It's much ado about nothing.
Yep.
And it's pretty sad.
Well, it is. And, as I was saying before, I don't agree with every position the Freedom Caucus holds. In fact, I was pretty ticked off the last session when the conservatives in the House started shoehorning spending bills into measures that had nothing to do with it. I understand some of those things had to be done, but I didn't like it at all. I thought it was ridiculous, and I thought they should have just gone with what the Senate said.
We didn't like it either. But as for you disagreeing with Freedom Caucus concepts, you have every right to be wrong.
Well, I mean, it doesn't happen very often, and in this case, it doesn't happen all that often at all. But the point is that it is the media's intention to try to paint with a broad ideological brush, to say that this group of people over here, they all think the same. They're the people that want to take away your health care. They're the people that want to reduce SNAP benefits. It is a Democrat tactic, and the reason why you are seeing that tactic is the media in Wyoming is the communications arm of the Democrat redcoat establishment.
I would like to say this. If you take their numbers, I think they concluded that there's somewhere around
31, I think is what they said.
Well, they said 31 that aren't.
Oh, okay. All right.
Anyway, I think in there they indicated somewhere around 17 or whatever the numbers are. I'm certainly not going to disclose how many people are there. It's fascinating to me that a handful of people are so influential.
Yeah, that's another aspect.
When is the last time you read a political article that didn't mention the Freedom Caucus?
Well, Representative John Baer did say that he wanted to make the Freedom Caucus a household name, and I believe that he's done that. And by the way, since you guys are so interested in reducing taxes, have you thought about reducing the amount of property taxes that the Democrat redcoat establishment media has to pay because you live rent-free in their heads for so long? I mean, have you thought about reducing their taxes? Do they pay taxes on that?
Actually, the thought has occurred.
All right. The whole point, my friends, is that this is bullcrap, and it deserves to go in the trash bin where it should have been left in the very beginning.
Right beside Nancy Pelosi's memoirs.
Right beside Kamala Harris's 107 Days and Nancy Pelosi's memoir. Well, my friends, today on the program, after that very long diatribe, monologue, not diatribe, we've got a great program for you. At the top of the second hour, I've got an interview with the president of the University of Wyoming, Ed Seidel. Actually had him in the studio. Another great interview that Agent 29 was able to hook up. Well done, sir. Glad you're finally earning your keep. I wish I could pay for your keep sometimes. But anyway, an interview with Ed Seidel.
Me too.
It's not that far off, Ken, to be perfectly honest with you. But during the interview, and let's just kind of talk about that. I mean, it's probably like way too far ahead, but let's talk about it. After I do an interview, I kind of sit down and take stock of how I think it went. Right after it, you really don't have any idea, and then you got to kind of reflect on it a little bit. But I think that the impression you're going to have, not to tell you what to think, you listen to this program to hear what I think. But anyway, it's probably going to come off as a little bit of softball, and there's a couple of reasons for that. First, he's the president of the University of Wyoming. I got him in the studio, and there are ways that you can ask questions that are not offensive. And I don't mean offensive as in shocking or mean-spirited or anything. By offensive, I mean that you're on offense. There are ways that you can ask questions to get the answer that you want without being in your face about it. And so there's a couple of questions. Like I asked him about funding. I asked him if if he thought Wyoming taxpayers paid enough to the University of Wyoming. By the way, you're going to be shocked when you hear me say how much money you give to the University of Wyoming. It is absolutely incredible how much cash, your cash, they have. There's another question I asked him about, why he's leaving. And in that case, you got to watch his face. And I think that he gave an honest answer. And so I think it was a cordial interview. But if you pay attention, you'll get the answers that you want.
I would echo that. I've had several interactions with both the president and Mike. And
Mike Smith, he's
he's vice president of public relations, and he's kind of the liaison with the legislature and that sort of thing. I've found really have enjoyed my time with both of them, frankly. We disagree on a lot of things, but I think they're straight shooters.
Yeah.
And I appreciated their willingness to sit down with us.
And as you know, over this year, and Ken, can you believe that it's almost been a year that we've been in this studio? I mean, it went by awfully fast, if you ask me.
I can believe it.
Oh, shut up. But over this past year, we've made a pretty big effort to get some people to come on the program that, we just don't necessarily agree. We don't see eye to eye on a whole heck of a lot of things. And the main reason we've done that is to say that, to show the other side, see, we can sit down and have a conversation and it not be, a cage match, that we can talk about policy issues and have a pleasant conversation about it.
For me, it's not just to show the other side.
Yeah.
It's show anybody. You can sit down, you can disagree without being disagreeable, which sounds rather trite and it's said all the time, but it's true. And as a member of the aforementioned Freedom Caucus, we often get labeled.
Evil Freedom Caucus. Yeah.
We often get all kinds of labels put on us, and I think this dispels at least some of that.
Well, I think the correct word for that, and President Seidel said it yesterday, after we were done, and I think we had stopped the recording at this point, but he looked around the studio, which, by the way, it is a pretty incredible studio, and it's hard to sit in those chairs over there and not come away with this impression. But anyway, he looked around and he said, you guys have a good thing here. This is very disarming. Now, what does that word disarming means? It doesn't mean softball. It doesn't mean anything like that. What it does mean is that an environment helps people take down their guards so that you can have a conversation.
Yeah, virtually everybody we've had in says that they enjoyed their time here, that they would come back. And that's what we want, is to be able to have that dialogue. I think it's also an opportunity for those on the other side to be able to, in person, address our audience, which they see as the other side. And I think there's a little bit of reciprocal. You may not agree with this, but that's why on occasion, and I did, a couple weeks ago, we'll talk to Wildfile. Sometimes
I did an interview
we need
with Rod Miller.
Yeah, sometimes we need to be able to express to that other audience the view from our side.
Sure.
Now, usually they try to cloud that so that it comes out wrong. But if you're careful, you can sometimes get the message across.
Sure. So anyway, enough talking about the interview. We're going to play it for you here in about 35 minutes. But I think it's a good one, and I'm glad that we were able to get him into the studio. So here's one that we're going to go to a break here in just a second. But I got this quick story, and I mentioned this yesterday. But this is from the Post Millennial. Representative Brandon Gill files articles of impeachment against Judge Boasberg over his role in the Arctic frost probe. And I went into this in depth yesterday, but essentially Boasberg was the guy that allowed the surveillance of members of Congress through via Jack Smith. Allowed him to get their phone records, their data, voice messages, text messages, those things, and it was Judge Boasberg in his order that said, you can't tell them that they're being surveilled because they might destroy evidence. All right, so he's not a good guy. This is the same judge that I haven't seen how he was able to get cases assigned to him, but this is the same guy that ruled against the Trump administration like 4 times in a row on illegal immigration. The judge that said turn the plane around, That's him. Well, Brandon Gill has filed articles of impeachment against him. And again, the way that works is the House of Representatives indicts. Okay, they file the charges. They're the ones that are supposed to do the investigation. And then the Senate is where the trial takes place. So there is no way possible that Judge Boasberg is going to be impeached. We don't have the votes in the Senate to do it. Okay, we do have a Republican majority, but there's still a couple of those Republicans are not exactly conservatives. I'm talking about, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski. Yeah, they do have an R at the end of their name, but that doesn't mean that they vote with the Republicans all that often at all. So this is a waste of time. I like Brandon Gill. I enjoy his committee meetings. I think that he's hilarious, and I think he's done a really good job exposing actors within the deep state for who they are. But this exercise, if it is only, and the only reason he's doing it is to make a statement that he's using the impeachment process to make a statement against Judge Boasberg. He could very well do the same thing, writing an op-ed for the New York Times. I think this is a waste of time, and I really wish that we wouldn't do this. Now, I mean, it's one thing, if there's a fair shot of getting him impeached, but you're dealing with the Democrat Party that doesn't do anything fairly. I don't think that there are any statesmen. Well, maybe there's one statesman in the Senate Republican caucus, and that would be John Fetterman. The rest of them, I don't think that there are any. And so if you know that it's just that what you're doing is just performative, that it's not going to result in anything, why waste your time? Let's work on something else that would benefit the American people. Let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the communism that is sweeping races across the United States. There's two of them. A guy stood up in Minneapolis with a Somali flag. You believe that one? Well, there's a deeper problem here, and it's one that I don't know if it'll ever go away. But we're going to talk about it when we come back. Whether you're tromping through the woods, stalking a big gigantic elk, or tromping through your driveway trying to find your snow shovel, one thing you definitely don't want to forget is your feet. That's right, my friends, there is nothing worse than elk hunting or shoveling your driveway when your feet are a big gigantic frozen block of ice. I suggest you get a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. I'm telling you the truth, my friends. I can walk outside of the cabin in a pair of tennis shoes, and it can be 0, it can be below 0, and my feet don't get cold at all. So just get you a pair of Buffalo Wool Company socks. Go to the website, thebuffalowoolco.com. You won't be disappointed. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Are you tired of giving your advertising dollars to companies that absolutely despise you? Well, you should be. What they do is they take your money and then they give it to the nearest red-coated rhino Republican that they can find who's going to vote with the Democrats almost the entire time they're in the legislature. You see, you just shouldn't give those people money, and you shouldn't advertise with companies that support them. I have a better idea. Why don't you advertise with a company that aligns with your values? I'd like to ask you to consider advertising on Cowboy State Politics. I have a statewide platform, and nobody is going to beat my advertising rates. Shoot me an email. The address is david@cowboystatepolitics.com. Stop helping the people that hate you and advertise with a company that really does align with your values. Again, that address is david@cowboystatepolitics.com. I would love to get that conversation started with you. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on a Thursday. Big show today. Interview with Ed Seidel at the top of the hour. Last day in the studio. We almost got a full week here. Unfortunately, Agent 29 is going to be out of town tomorrow, and so we will be back in the original Cowboy State Politics studio. But don't worry, the show doesn't change. It's just geography. So tomorrow, back in the original studio, and then I have no idea what's going to happen next week. Who knows? Things are always up in the air. Well, actually, I do know part of what's going to happen next week. Agent 29 and I both will be out of town at the end of the week, and so we won't have an episode on Friday. Though, I don't know. We won't be here in the studio on Friday. How's that? I have given some thought, depending on if I have a solid internet connection, I may do a show on location. I thought about that. Maybe we could do that. Pull in some people that we don't normally get to talk to.
I may have a committee meeting or may not. We'll know more after this week.
Yeah, well, okay. So anyway, he's off doing the people's work. Did you ever think that you would see communists, actual communists, elected to office in America? I certainly never thought that. And, communism is one of those things. It's kind of like the clap. You never get rid of it. It always comes back, and it always shows up at the most inopportune time. Not that I know anything about that, but communism, I know a lot about it.
When you said you never get rid of it, the first thing I thought of was Nancy Pelosi, which
well, that's not
funny
true.
In that context.
Not true, because we just got rid of her. But we have had people in positions of power in America that they are communists, or at least they were members of the Communist Party, which I don't know. Maybe being a communist is a lot like, being a man or a woman. You never really get to change. It's just one of those things you are or you aren't. But here's a little piece from El Rushbo about James Comey. Listen to this, or watch this, rather.
How many of you have thought, if you've thought about it, how many of you have heard or thought that James Comey was a lifelong Republican? I have. I've always thought that James Comey was a lifelong Republican. I've been told that James Comey is a lifelong Republican. Turns out not to be true. Are you aware that James Comey used to be a communist?
An actual communist.
In a 2003 interview with New York Magazine, James Comey said before voting for Jimmy Carter in 1980, he'd been a communist. He admitted, I'd moved from communist to whatever I am now. Now, we know that John Brennan, Obama's CIA director, was a communist, or at least had voted for the Communist Party. But I had never heard this about Comey. Now we find out that under Obama, the CIA director and the FBI director both had histories of not just flirtation, but serious immersion into communism. And like the KGB always said, no one ever leaves the KGB. Nobody ever leaves this way of thinking.
Nobody ever does. And if you're the person, and all right, so in high school, I knew a lot of people that, you start, if you read a lot, you drift from one ideology to another. Not me, of course. I've always been a conservative. And my mom is fond of saying, David, you've been a conservative since you were 5. Now, but other people, you're, depending on what you're reading, you might vacillate between Ayn Rand and Karl Marx. And there's that old adage. If you're not a radical Democrat when you're 20, you probably don't have a heart. All these things don't apply to me, of course. But if you are not a conservative by the time you're 40, then you obviously don't have a brain. Now, that part is absolutely true. Once you start paying taxes and you watch how government spends your money, if you're not a conservative, then you're just not thinking. Or, maybe you were absent the day brains were handed out. I don't know.
There's the old story about the puppies.
The puppies?
You know the puppy story?
I don't know about the puppies. I know some people that kick puppies.
Had a little...
I read that article in the Cow Pie.
Please don't
Freedom
let that
Caucus
get out.
Does that? Yeah, I read that article.
So, little boy's looking at brand new puppies.
Yeah.
He says, "Oh, they're Democrats."
Ah.
Comes back 2 or 3 days later, they're all Republicans now. What do you mean? What are you talking about? Oh, their eyes are open.
Exactly. Well, if you didn't think, I mean, and there was a piece out yesterday. I didn't go into it on the show, but it was how Zoran Mamdani, the one of the communists that got elected to office, how well he has tapped a lot of the establishment folks for his administration. You know, he says he's a communist, but really he's tapped a lot of the people that have been in the regime for a while. So really, it's not going to be all that different. I beg to differ. Ken, play the soundbite that says "No problem too big for government." Hit that one.
Prove that there is no problem too large for government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about.
Oh, there's no problem too big for government to solve and no problem too small for government to care about. That certainly sounds pretty communistic to me. That means if you live in New York, old Mamdani is going to be present everywhere that you are. Kind of smacks a little bit of 1984 Big Brother, you know, with the 5 minutes hate and the view screen in your bedroom. By the way, did you know, Ken, that a couple of years ago, under Barack Obama and again under Joe Biden, that 1984, the book by George Orwell, was a #1 bestseller again? Weird, huh? I bet it is again in New York. Well, communism, my friends, is on the rise, and there's no question about it. You have two mayors of two major cities that are now communists. The guy in Minneapolis, he was waving the Somali flag at his acceptance speech. Can you believe that? And he just got elected mayor, and he's waving a Somali flag. Well, anyway, from Breitbart, Trump says America is at a crossroads of communism and common sense after Mamdani's win. President Donald Trump on Wednesday in Miami said that America is at a crossroads, quote, between communism and common sense after radical leftist Zoran Mamdani won the New York City mayoral race, which he said is a harbinger for what congressional Democrats want to do to America. Trump weighed in on Mamdani's win and the choice now facing America during his remarks at the America Business Forum in the afternoon. Quote, after last night's results, the decision facing all Americans could not be more clear. We have a choice between communism and common sense. And, you take a look back 1,000 years. Communism hasn't worked. And if it worked, we'd be using it, I guess. But it hasn't worked. Our opponents are offering an economic nightmare. We're delivering an economic miracle, Trump said, touting the record rapid investment that has been pledged since he took office. Communism and socialism has never worked, my friends. And it doesn't matter which adjective they attach to it, whether it's democratic socialism or whether it's compassionate socialism or whatever word that they attach to it. It is the same thing. And you hear this argument from socialists all the time. Well, they didn't do it right before. You see, we are going to do it right. It's the Swedish model. It's the Norwegian model that we should focus on. That's what you hear from Bernie Sanders all the time. But the truth is, every time that communism and socialism has been tried, it has resulted in poverty, misery, and death. You can blame the deaths of hundreds of millions of people. You can lay their deaths at the feet of every communist and socialist that has ever picked up a copy of the Communist Manifesto. And now in America, we have elected communist leaders. But here's the bright side of this, that we know that it doesn't work. And so what is going to happen in New York City is an economic nightmare. Yesterday, I told you that just the bus fare alone, if Mamdani goes through with his plan to eliminate bus fares, it's going to cost the city of New York $700 million a year. $700 million. Now, there's already a deficit from that one area, that one revenue stream of over $1 billion a year, with free bus fares and people jumping turnstiles to get on the subway and all of those things. But you're still looking at close to $750 million that's not going to be in the coffers of the of Mamdani's administration. He's going to enact government food stores. Now, this one's going to fail miserably. And why do we know that? Because it always has. This isn't the first time that somebody has come along and said, I think the price of groceries is too high, and we, the government, and you heard what he said, that there's how did he put it?
That there is no problem too large for government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about.
Yeah, that's how he put it. So that means that government under Zoran Mamdani is going to be involved in every aspect of a New Yorker's life. Well, that is only going to work so long as he has other people's money to spend. And the bright side of this is we already know that it won't work. And so you are going to see a mass exodus from the city of New York. It's already happening. Yesterday, the New York fire chief, FDNY, I don't know if he's called a chief or commissioner or whatever, but the head guy, he resigned. And I saw a piece, I don't know where it's at, this morning that said that several other officials are going to follow. And so it is not only the experienced people at the top, the FDNY and the NYPD and those agencies, they're not going to be able to operate in a communist environment, which is what's going to happen. But like I say, the silver lining is it will be yet another example of where socialism and communism doesn't work. And, it may take a while. It may take 4 years. It may take 8 years. But eventually, New York City will come to their senses. So let me go ahead and play for you what Trump said in Miami. It's the video, Ken, that says Trump fleeing communism. Wait, before you play that, let me go here. On the Cowboy State Politics podcast, I have an ongoing series called Escape from Communism. And I think that there's 4 of them. But every time I run into somebody that immigrated here from a communist country, I make it a point to go interview them. And their story is all the same. It's the exact same thing. The geography is different, whether it is Czechoslovakia or if it's Russia or if it's Romania or Cuba. That's all the countries that I've got so far. The story's all the same, that it starts with free stuff and that it ends with poverty and misery. That's the way that it always happens. And the reason you study history is so you can learn what didn't work in the past. And, maybe you're smart enough, you turn 40, and you're smart enough to not do that again. But let's go ahead and play what the president says about communism.
If you want to see what congressional Democrats wish to do to America, just look at the result of yesterday's election in New York, where their party installed a communist as the mayor of the largest city in the nation. Remember, I've said we will never have a socialist elected to any post in our country. I used to say that, and I was right. We skipped socialist and we put in a communist instead. That didn't work out too well. But as I've warned for many years, our opponents are hell-bent on turning America into a communist Cuba or socialist Venezuela, and you see what happened to those places. For generations, Miami has been a haven for those fleeing communist tyranny in South Africa. I mean, if you take a look at what's going on in parts of South Africa, look at South Africa, what's going on. Look at South America, what's going on. I'm not we have a G20 meeting in South Africa. South Africa shouldn't even be in the Gs anymore because what's happened there is bad. I'm not going. I told them I'm not going. I'm not going to represent our country there. It shouldn't be there. Take a look at what's happening in different parts of South America. Take a look at what's happening in different parts of the world. But now the Democrats are so extreme that Miami will soon be the refuge for those fleeing communism in New York City. They flee. They flee. Where do you live? New York City, but I'm trying to leave because I don't want to live in a communist regime.
One of the reasons, well, let me rephrase that. Countries, almost all countries have borders. In fact, you can't really have a country if you don't have a border. Capitalist countries build borders to keep people out, to keep illegal aliens out of the country, and protect the valuable resources that you have, the lifestyle that you have. That's why capitalist countries have borders. Now, communist countries, socialist countries, they have borders too, but it's to keep people in. There's a big difference between the two. One is you have to keep people from leaving. because if you don't, you can't have a communist regime unless you have people to rule. It was a very long time ago that the world rejected the divine right of kings, that we had kingdoms set up, and the king would claim that no, God has appointed me to rule over you. A long time ago, we rejected that principle, but or at least in words, we rejected it. But now we have a new incarnation of that. We have communist and socialist countries that instead of claiming that God appointed them, they just seize power. And that's what happens. And usually it does happen through an election. That's what happened with Adolf Hitler. Of course, that was fascism. But really, I mean, we're with fascism, communism, socialism, you're only talking about a difference of degrees. The end result is always the same. It's just whichever whichever rest area you've stopped at on the way to your destination. But they always end the same. And it is impossible to have one of those regimes without having people to rule. And, freedom, liberty, those things are diametrically opposed to the ideas of capitalism and freedom and liberty. And that's why socialist and communist countries have borders, how they have to restrict liberty, both your freedom of speech. You can't say anything against the government. They have to restrict religious freedom, because if you believe something is of greater power than the state, then the state's power will crumble. And you certainly can't have freedom of movement, because if you had open borders in a communist regime, you wouldn't have any people left there.
There's an example I want to throw back up, because I think sometimes people have pretty short memories.
Oh, they do.
I was living in Germany when the wall came down, the separation between the East and
Which
West.
side went to where?
There was a little bit of both, to be fair, because some people had never been allowed back in to see their home and their people, and they couldn't get around. But one of the best examples is in West Germany, and we lived in the Stuttgart area, where they make Ferrari there. They've got BMW. They've got all these just world-class, amazing automobiles. And on the other side of the wall,
The Yugo.
the Trabant.
The Trabant.
There's one up there. And I have a license plate from one, but those were the most remarkable, technologically free vehicles. It's like the technology just frozen in time, and people had waiting lists for 3, 4, 5 years to get one of these pieces of crap. So when the wall came down, these things came across by the hundreds and were just abandoned all over the place. And so, we got
get right across the border, and then they just ditch the car.
Yeah,
it's
ditch
worthless.
that, and
it's better to walk than to ride in one of those.
To me, it was always so striking about how a capitalist or a Western nation survives versus the same people, same everything, except the governance was different.
Well, and there's a lot of myths about Cuba. You often hear leftists claim, well, they have a great healthcare system. That's bullcrap. If you are, and one of the reasons why misery and poverty and death exists in a communist country is all of the talented people leave. Because one, they can't make a living, and two, because they can't practice their craft, because you don't have the necessary goods you can't buy the medicine, you can't buy the materials, and it's nothing but a cauldron of death is what a communist country is. And make no mistake, my friends, there's 2 major cities that are run by communists. Unfortunately, they're not going to be there very long. At least, if anybody has any common sense in either of those 2 cities, they are not going to be around very long. But I think that the important part here that I don't think that you should lose sight of is how they got to where they're at. It's not that New York and Minneapolis voters woke up one day and said, I want to be a communist. I don't think that anybody actually wakes up and seriously thinks about that. Maybe there are some radical 20-year-olds that think that communism would be great, but nobody with a brain wakes up and says that. However, it has been a slow march towards socialism, and the reason for it is the idea of free stuff is always alluring. That we went through the Biden administration where the price of groceries went through the roof. The price of fuel is still up. I wish we could work on that. But everything was more expensive. Everything. The price of eggs, $7 and $8 for a dozen. Did you know that there's a record number of people that have chickens? And why do they do that? Because it's cheaper for them to keep the chickens and buy the food and have their own eggs than it is to go to the grocery store. Oh, my God. Now, I'm assuming that even though we're rid of Joe Biden, not rid of his ideology, but we're rid of him, that, hopefully those people keep their chickens. But there's a big question here. The left is not collapsing. The last couple of weeks, I spent a considerable amount of time explaining to you that the Democrat Party, even in Wyoming, is on the rise. They are ascending. They're not collapsing. And there's a piece in The Blaze entitled, "The Left Isn't Collapsing, It's Consolidating Power." And the only way that a Zoran Mondani, and we can talk about the voter turnout, which is what I did yesterday, but the only way that he was able to rise is with a consolidation of the ideology of the left. Free stuff. And I quote, "Since last November, I've warned that this is from Paul Gottfried, I've warned that Republican voters not to believe the happy talk coming from the friendly media. Nothing suggests the Democrat Party is collapsing or that Donald Trump has killed wokeness, as Eric Trump claimed recently. The fight against the woke left and its Democrat Party embodiment continues, and the results remain mixed. Trump has made real progress in removing DEI programs from the federal government, yet another thing that we're going to talk to Ed Seidel about, and institutions that take federal funds. Yet schools, corporations, and other major organizations continue to find new ways to keep the ideology alive. The Democrat Party is not collapsing. Its radicals are thriving. Black voters are not abandoning it. Conservatives need to stop pretending otherwise. In blue and purple states, even the most extreme woke policies, like letting biological males compete in women's sports or enter girls' locker rooms, barely move voters. More than half the electorate in places like Virginia, New York, Illinois, California, Oregon appear comfortable with positions that conservatives describe as 80-20 moral issues. The electoral evidence for such optimism does not exist. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't exist everywhere. I think the polling suggests otherwise in Wyoming. But I think in this case, Wyoming is at least partially the exception. I mean, yeah, the Democrat Party is rising in Wyoming, but really, they're still on the verge of not being a major party. So it's not the threat that other states are seeing. Polls show that Democrats are holding barely a 30% approval rating, but Republicans don't fare much better. A recent Gallup survey found that the GOP was only 3 points higher in popularity, while Democrats lead by 20 points on, quote, acceptable philosophical positions. Democrats also hold a massive financial advantage and dominate the institutions that shape culture and opinion. Public sector unions, schools, universities, corporate media, and Hollywood. Their radical wing isn't dragging them down, it's defining them. Just ask Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Zoran Mamdani, or other progressive Democrats who keep winning elections. Now, we could claim that that's because their base is moved to a far more radical position. And perhaps that is true in places like Minneapolis. Minnesota has long been a Democrat stronghold, as is New York and Washington and California and Oregon. So, yes, those are Democrat strongholds. But the left never stops. You see, we conservatives, when we get a win, we tend to sit back and say, hey, project, mission accomplished. We're done. We're good. And that's what we did with the first Trump administration. He won, and conservatives thought, our work here is done. We got Trump, and everything's good. And then what happened? The 2020 election. Now, I personally think that it was absolutely rigged. And if you don't believe that actually the election results were rigged, it was rigged for a lot of other reasons. The deep state was actively working against Trump in a lot of different ways. But I absolutely think that there was some electoral shenanigans going on. So, but the left doesn't do that. They don't sit back on their laurels. They don't say mission accomplished, even when they win one. I guarantee you the Democrat Party in New York and Minnesota is there. I guarantee that they are dumping truckloads of cash into media, advertisement, and in attempts to convince you of their Democrat agenda. So don't think for 1 second that the left has stopped or that they're accepting this victory or that they're going to back off in any way, shape, or form. If you turn on Z94 here in Sheridan and you listen for 2 hours, my bet is you're going to hear at least one, perhaps more, radio ads from the Sheridan Democrat Party. Now, they didn't used to do that before. Why are they doing it now? Why do they have the funds to do it now? It's not because they found some sort of treasure chest somewhere that it was marked advertising. They didn't find that. No. People are donating to the Democrat Party. And it is beholden of conservatives to make the case of why conservatism works. And it's not hard, right? We started out the program talking about these idiots over at the Cow Pie, thinking that it's some sort of revelation of who is in the Freedom Caucus. Well, as I said, the Freedom Caucus needs to stand up and say, you're darn right we are, and we're proud of it, and why aren't you? You have to make the case. That's how you win elections. And to just sit back and say, we've done our work, we're just going to put our heads down and continue moving forward, that is folly, my friends. Because the left never stops, and they didn't stop in New York, and they didn't stop in Minnesota, and they didn't stop in Seattle, even though that communist mayor lost. But the Democrat Party in those areas absolutely is on the rise, and I'll defy anyone who tells me that that is not the case in Wyoming, though it's a difference of degrees here. There's a reason why a couple of hundred people showed up on the courthouse steps in fairly conservative Sheridan, Wyoming, and just look at the elected officials in Sheridan. Okay, the county commission, the liberals have a 3-2 majority. The city council, they have a 4-1 majority. Now, state electeds, okay, we have a senator who's pretty much a redcoat. We've got 2 representatives, Agent 29 sitting here, 3 representatives, 29, Lori Bratton, and Tom Kelly, that pretty much side with the conservatives the entire time. But again, riddle me this, answer this question. Why were there hundreds of people protesting on the courthouse steps and chanting things that we think are ridiculous? No kings. Why were they there? It's because the Democrat Party is on the rise. Well, we're going to go ahead and take our second break. And when we come back, I'm going to play for you the interview with UW President Ed Seidel. It's a good interview. Stick with me. We'll play it in just a second. I know. It feels like it's going to be 60 degrees for the entire winter. But you'd be wrong, my friends. Sooner or later, probably sooner, all of that white crap is going to start flying around, and all of your fun summertime playthings that you spent way too much money on, that little side-by-side that you spent $80,000 on, I wouldn't buy one of those. But if you did, you definitely don't want it living in a giant snowbank for the next 7 months. You could prevent that incredibly unfortunate circumstance simply by calling my friends Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. They are the experts in metal building construction. They've been doing it longer than anybody else around, and they do a much better job. So, to prevent yourself from spending a whole bunch of money next spring on repair bills, just call Marcos and Jesse. Their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election. Siberia.
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada.
Straight to hell. Iceland.
France.
Asia's pretty cool.
And has the past 5 weeks just been more than you could bear? If that's the case, you have come to the right place. All you need to do is call my friend Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy state politics is only going to get bigger. Well, it's getting way bigger than I ever thought it would. You can listen to the podcast anywhere that you can get them: iTunes, iHeartRadio, anywhere. Cowboy State Politics Live, usually every Tuesday through Friday from 8 till 10 a.m. Welcome back to the program, my friends. I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics Live on a Thursday. And now my interview with UW President Ed Seidel. I'd like to welcome to the program University of Wyoming President Dr. Ed Seidel and now Vice President Mike Smith. So, Dr. Seidel, Mike, welcome to Cowboy State Politics.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Well, everybody that is your first time on the show, you get the same treatment. So why don't you both just take a minute or so and tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, sure. So I'm president. I'm in my 6th year at the University of Wyoming. Continue to be honored and energized by the role, and I really enjoy what I do. Before coming here, I had a kind of a long career in academia. Directly before being here, I was a vice president for economic development at the University of Illinois. So I think a lot every day about how does the university help contribute to the economy. And then a couple stops before that, I was a black hole physicist, and I can't quite explain how I got from there to here, but here I am.
Wow. So you left one black hole and came to another one?
Exactly. A lot of jokes like that.
I bet. So what about you, Mike?
Mike Smith. I'm Vice President of Government Affairs and Community Engagement at the university. I grew up in Wyoming in Laramie and have 2 degrees, a law degree, and I was going to be a high school history and government teacher after undergrad in Laramie, but got sidetracked by politics. Went to Washington.
That always happens.
Yeah, I know, right?
Ask Ken over there.
Yeah, I got a chance to work with Craig Thomas in Washington. Did that for 5 years in both the House and Senate, and that just kind of turned me on to this field, and so yeah, had a lot of different roles over the years. Worked in the oil and gas world for a good long time, and just loved the university and being a part of it.
So I guess my first question, Dr. Seidel, is, and this one may sound a little bit frivolous, but before we started recording, we were discussing how the world needs more cowboys. What is it about that phrase that you think tells Wyoming or tells the world why we need more cowboys? What is it about that?
Well, as I've really learned since I've come here, it's about the spirit of the West, the way it is to me. And I just love that. And I do wear blue jeans every day and cowboy boots, and I just really enjoy it. And I think it means a lot to the people who live here, and it means a lot to people who want to come here. And that's one of the reasons why it's a good marketing phrase for us. But it's a lot more than that. It's about the culture that we have on the campus and in the state, and I just really identify with it.
So since we have Mike here, marketing wise, what has that slogan done for the university? Because I understand there was a big uptick when we started using that.
Yeah, it's been amazing. I don't have all the exact numbers, but our marketing group won awards the year that campaign kicked off nationally, right? So I think what makes it so effective is how those of us in Wyoming can identify with it, but folks outside of the state as well have a vision of the West and what Wyoming stands for, and it just captures that. And I really think at the core of it, it says all of us can be cowboys, right? No matter how we're dressed or where we come from, we can relate to the code of the West and those kind of core principles.
So it's the ethos and not what you look like.
I
is what
think
you're saying.
I think it's the authenticity of that statement that makes it resonate with folks in and out of the state.
Speaking of marketing and cowboys, Josh Allen, you guys took advantage of kind of it dropped in your lap, to get a chance to celebrate the university. You bought a Super Bowl commercial. And if any feedback on that, any response as to what that might have done?
Oh, I have a lot to say. In fact, it's really ramped up our visibility at the national level. And in fact, we're going to Buffalo in a couple of weeks now, I think, to celebrate Wyoming Day at the Bills. And I anticipate we'll recruit a lot more students just because of that event in particular. It's led to a number of things, like I wrote an op-ed piece last year celebrating Josh Allen and the Cowboy spirit and how that's a really meaningful thing for the university. And it's about giving anyone a chance and having them come and show what they can do. And we even had the tagline, it's University of Wyoming is where real MVPs are made. And I think it's something that's really resonating about what our students can do when they come. When we open doors and we help train them, then they can go anywhere.
All right, enough softballs.
All right.
So my pal Gabe Saint speaks very highly of you, and he in specifically your work together with him, I guess, in around free speech. So my question to you is, while you've done a lot of work on the campus in promoting free speech and perhaps creating a more welcoming environment, what remains to be done?
Oh, well, it's a continuing effort. There's a lot that needs to be done here. So we've taken a really principled stand on freedom of expression and respectful discourse on the campus. And that means we signed one of the early adopters of statements on institutional neutrality, meaning the university itself doesn't take a particular political stand, but we work very hard to make sure that all voices are welcomed on the campus. And so that's more than a slogan. It means we train students in the first week that they're here on what that means. We train faculty on what it means to be looking in a classroom at inquiry, not advocacy, as we call it. And I'll just say that means you have to be inquisitive, you have to be looking at different points of view, but the faculty themselves are not promoting their own personal views. And so that just right in there's a lot of work to be done to make sure people really understand it. I had meetings today with all senates, the faculty, the staff, and the student senates on some topics where sometimes in a campus you'll have people expressing things that are very upsetting to other people. And
sometimes rightfully so, though.
Yes, that's right. There are a lot of reasons for it, but the First Amendment protects that kind of speech. And so we want to be supportive, but also recognize that it's a complicated topic.
I couldn't agree more. Now, what percentage of teachers in Wyoming, I would say high school teachers, come from the University of Wyoming?
It's a very large percentage. I don't know the numbers. Yeah.
It's difficult to determine exact percentages on where folks go, but it's significant number.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, I saw a figure not that long ago that I thought it was, in the 60 to 70% range. Now, that being said, a lot has been made in the media about how much Wyoming pays its teachers. Now, you guys are on the education side of it. Do you think that Wyoming pays its teachers enough? And if not, why? And if we do, then that's great. So what do you think?
Well, let me say, first of all, I don't know how they rank in terms of the salaries, but generally speaking, salaries in Wyoming are a bit lower than they are in other states, and you have to think about that. What's the market? Where are people going? And it's generally speaking, I mean, for us at the university, the salaries have been our number one priority because we have to think about we're competing in a global marketplace. Same thing for teachers.
Okay. So Wyoming is a little bit different than other universities. We call ours a land grant university. So in your mind, what is the role of the University of Wyoming as a land grant university? What are we supposed to be doing?
Well, I think about that a lot because
I would hope so.
yeah, I do. I think about it a lot. In fact, I came from Illinois, and Abraham Lincoln from Illinois signed the Land Grant Act, and I'm quite schooled in this. But I think fundamentally, it means a land grant university is there to help support the growth of the economy and the well-being of its citizens, and that's really its top mission. And it was agriculture in the very beginning of the land grant, and it's still a very important component, but there are different forms of supporting the economy. So in Wyoming, of course, energy has vastly overtaken
Sure.
agriculture in terms of the amount of money that particular market brings. But then, so when I got here, I thought a lot about what markets operate in the state. And so one of them, number two, is actually hospitality and tourism. And we didn't have a program that supported that. So I made sure that we built a program, and it's been well supported now by people, not only by the university, but we've had some wonderful donors. The Kemmers have really stepped up and helped us. I'm
Certainly.
really thankful of that. So that's just an example. So another thing we've worked on is supporting entrepreneurship. Because we know that will help grow the economy. We teach our students how to grow businesses and try to provide opportunities for them. That's really important. So those are just some examples of land grant activities.
All right. Well, in sometimes the legislature sees a different role for the university, and there was a lot of press coverage after, I don't know if it was the last session or the session before, about the university's DEI programs. And I know that I was very interested in how the university dealt with those. So I was wondering if you could tell us, how did you deal with the legislature's mandate to cut back on some of those DEI programs?
Well, I'll say a few things about that. So first of all, there are DEI programs around the country that really were promoting or advantaging some groups over others. I mean, fundamentally in ways that needed to be corrected, I think. I never felt that we were specifically working towards those kinds of goals. We're all about access and merit, and I think we that's generally the way the university operates. At the same time, we were promoting that as a way to support our different communities. And so that's very important to us, that everyone is welcome, and we feel that we do what we can to support them. So we did sunset. We looked ourselves in the mirror and said, okay, are there some ways that we're not really living up to those kinds of goals? And so when the legislature was talking about it, we were also on it actually before the legislature was, because we wanted to make sure that we were really doing what we should be doing. And so we did sunset our DEI program specifically, and we are about access and engagement now. And it's not just smoke and mirrors or just nice words for the same thing. We have really gone through every single program, every single website, and we have instructions on how we're supposed to be doing these things. And I think generally speaking, we're doing a good job with it.
Okay, let's kind of move on to a different topic. I think that the University of Wyoming is different in another way from other schools. It's pretty affordable to go to the University of Wyoming if you live here. And I think just about everybody, if you want to go to college, you can find a way to afford it. Do you think that, well, let me put it another way. How much should a university education cost somebody?
Well, it's in our Constitution that it should be, quote, as free as possible.
True.
End quote.
We can have a debate about the...
Right. So it's all in kind of the devil's in the details there, right? But we strive to make it absolutely affordable. And we're really proud of the fact we're one of the best values in higher education. We're often ranked by different organizations. Wall Street Journal, I think, had us ranked not too long ago as number 5 best value in the country. And so we work hard to keep our tuition affordable, and both for in-state and out-of-state. And we're always looking at, are we competitive with other states? I just had a student today tell me they came here because it was cheaper to come here as an out-of-state student than it was for them to be an in-state student in Pennsylvania. And so that's something we're proud of. At the same time, you get a lot more than you pay for at the university, because our faculty are unusually dedicated to the students just because of the culture we have. And it means a lot to our faculty to have successful students, not just when they're at the university, but after they graduate. So they're going to be there to open doors, to write letters of recommendation, to give advice, and so on. So that's one thing I'm really proud of at the university. You get more than you pay for at the university.
What do you
David,
think, Mike?
I just wanted to add a really important component of that cost piece in Wyoming is the Hathaway Scholarship that the legislature established in 2006, I believe, 2007 timeframe. And we have some statistics along the lines of 86% of Wyoming high school grads that come to the university qualify for one level or another of the Hathaway Scholarship. And the percentage of students who graduate with zero debt is something like 67%, 66% of Hathaway recipients come out with zero debt. And those that do, it's the average total of like $16,000. So
Yeah, it's pretty, pretty affordable.
you know, it's a good value in the higher ed marketplace. And then, you know, I think the next step is ensuring those students have a place to go after graduation and find a job and get to work and you know, utilize that education for what it's meant for.
Yeah, that was kind of my next question, is what percentage of students leave the university with job offers or employed? Do we have that data?
I don't have that data as far as if you're walking out the door with a job. I'm not conversant in what percentage reports having a job. That kind of stuff would be self-reported back to us through alumni groups or the colleges.
Anecdotal,
So
whatever.
it's
We're working to assess that more, and maybe this brings me to another point. It turns out that national studies show that if you have had one paid internship as an undergraduate at just any time during your undergraduate career, you're 50% more likely to get a job in the career path that you're looking for, which makes sense, right? So one of our goals right now is to try to raise funds both through private donations and corporate partnerships. But we also have a request into the legislature this year for funds to help support internships for students in the state of Wyoming. And I think no matter how we do it, it's just one of the top goals to make sure we could offer that to any student who comes to the university.
Okay, let's look at it from a different perspective. You guys get to view the entire thing, right? You're the leadership of the school. And a university education in Wyoming is pretty affordable. We already discussed for pretty much everybody. Do you think that we push too many people into a university education?
I mean, there might be some that maybe feel for some reason they need to go to college, but they may be better suited going into the trade or going to a community college, or there are lots of different opportunities and so on. So frankly, I went to college when I wasn't quite mature enough to do so.
I think a lot of us did. I wouldn't know anybody like that.
It took me 6 years to graduate, but I finally did, and it took me a while to grow up, basically. So there are a lot of reasons why it's not always the best thing, but on the other hand, we do accept a large fraction. I think it's about 95% of the students that apply, and we're working very hard on success rates. And so I think many people have potential. It's a question of, can you unlock a student's potential? Can you motivate them properly? Can you educate them properly? And that's where we bend over backwards to try to do the best we can there.
All right. So my next question has to do with funding. I talk a lot about what happens at the legislature on this show because my producer happens to be a legislator. The university benefits from an extraordinary amount of taxpayer dollars. And we just looked at it, and it's for a biennium, it's close to $500 million. Yet at the same time, the university also has a not insignificant amount of savings. So my question is, are Wyoming citizens paying enough for the University of Wyoming, or should we pay more, or do you think we pay too much?
Well, a lot of ways you could answer that. So I'll just start by saying, first of all, we're really grateful for the support we have. And I have to say, as potential candidate and then potential president here, that was a big factor in my wanting to come here, because I see that state really invests in its university. And there's only one university, so that's another thing. So we really have to do it all. So we try to be very good stewards of the funds that we get. And we've had In recent years, we've had difficulties. There have been budget cuts because the state has been sometimes in hard times in terms of its economy, and we haven't kept up with inflation. So we, of course, advocate for what we need, but I think we're very measured in what we ask for. At least that's my view.
Okay, so let's hit the nail on the head a little bit. You've been the president for 6 years.
Yeah.
Why are you leaving?
Well, I will be in July. I will have been in this role for 6 years. I'm still excited about what I'm doing and what I've done, and very proud of it. But I'll be 69, and I got grandkids, and I got 2 kids as well, and don't have enough time for them. I'd like to spend some more time there, but I'm also not leaving the university. I think I've got I planned at least in the next year to stay on as a faculty member, and I think I'm interested in doing anything I can to be a good citizen for the university and for the state in the coming time. So I'm still dedicated to what I'm doing here.
Excellent.
So we talked earlier about the idea that constitutionally your goal is to give an education as close to free as possible. Now, I've been down and I've toured the campus, and when you walk around that campus, it is gorgeous. I mean,
It's amazing.
yeah, it is stunningly so. One of the places that I got to tour was the new science lab. Absolutely world class. There's probably very few things like it in the entire world. Nice to have, but how do you square that with the idea that we're supposed to do it as cheaply as possible? Is there another way? If you wouldn't mind commenting a little on that.
Well, sure. So I think it's important, and we're great beneficiaries of the state support for those facilities, the science initiative, the engineering building, the stadium, the new law school building, and it goes on. They're really great facilities there. And I would just say we need to have world-class facilities in order to provide a world-class education, which is what we really strive to do. And then, for example, the science building that you mentioned is one that allows us to do interdisciplinary research. And by that, I mean different faculty working on different aspects of, say, a problem in energy extraction. So you might need some physicists and some geoscientists, and now some computer scientists and so on. So that's a place where they can come together. Then from that kind of a place and the work they can do, they can get much more funding from a place like the Department of Energy or the National Science Foundation. So my goal in the last 6 years, one of them, has been to enhance the funding that we bring in from external sources that leverages the state dollars that we get. And we just achieved last year what's called R1 status. So that means we're in the top 5% of research universities in the country. That turns into tens of millions of dollars per year that come in from other sources because we had that state support. So we leverage that and turn it into more funding for us.
Is there another way? If you wouldn't mind commenting a little on that.
Well, sure. So I think it's important, and we're great beneficiaries of the state support for those facilities, the science initiative, the engineering building, the stadium, the new law school building, and it goes on. They're really great facilities there. And I would just say we need to have world-class facilities in order to provide a world-class education, which is what we really strive to do. And then, for example, the science building that you mentioned is one that allows us to do interdisciplinary research. And by that, I mean different faculty working on different aspects of, say, a problem in energy extraction. So you might need some physicists and some geoscientists, and now some computer scientists and so on. So that's a place where they can come together. Then from that kind of a place and the work they can do, they can get much more funding from a place like the Department of Energy or the National Science Foundation. So my goal in the last 6 years, one of them, has been to enhance the funding that we bring in from external sources that leverages the state dollars that we get. And we just achieved last year what's called R1 status. So that means we're in the top 5% of research universities in the country. That turns into tens of millions of dollars per year that come in from other sources because we had that state support. So we leverage that and turn it into more funding for us.
I do have one more question. In conservative circles, there's a lot of talk about the trustees at the University of Wyoming. Do you think there's any benefit to having the Board of Trustees elected?
Well,
I know I may have put you in a bit of a pickle there, but
Well, I'll just say I think the system we have, from my point of view, is working well. I'm proud of the trustees that we have. I know every single one of them by now very well. They're all advocates for the state and for the university. They hold us accountable. I just think that the system is working well, and I'm actually quite honored to work with them.
excellent. Last question. On this show, I talk a lot about freedom and liberty. In fact, it's like every show. Today it was Zoran Mamdani, and there may not be as much liberty in other places. What do you think the university's role, and what should you do? What should the school do to advance the principle of liberty?
Well, to advance the principle of liberty, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is going right back to our freedom of expression activity. That's really important. And there have been stories I hear that some people have felt that they didn't feel very comfortable expressing themselves over time. On the other hand, I've had a number of, for example, conservative-leaning faculty have said they've come to the university because we have this freedom of expression activity, and they have felt very much more comfortable here than elsewhere in expressing themselves. So that's just one aspect of it, maybe one of the most important ones. So we're doubling down on that.
Okay, excellent. Well, Dr. Seidel, Mike, thank you very much for taking some time to sit down with me. I really appreciate it. And you're welcome to come back on the show anytime you like.
Thanks. I'd love to do that.
Thank you.
All right. So there you have it. So now that we've watched it again, any thoughts, Agent 29? I think it went pretty well. And I think if you paid attention to Dr. Seidel's answers to the questions, I think it was pretty clear. There was a couple of questions he avoided, and he gave some pretty vague answers on. What do you think?
I enjoyed doing the interview. I enjoyed their perspective. I think he made some valid points. But again, I do think he kind of sidestepped where we were going to. But you can tell it.
Yeah, I think so.
You can watch it and you can tell what might have been an issue.
The question of, hey, we give you guys $500 million, which let's just put that into a little bit of perspective here. So the entire city of Sheridan isn't anywhere close to that budget per year. In fact, I mean, they're like, I don't know, 30 some million dollars a year. And they're in a full police department, full sheriff's department, and there's all sorts of programs in the county. We pay for transportation, streets and roads and all those things. And the university gets...
And don't forget the flower pot. Oh, that's county.
Yeah,
sorry.
County. Well, okay. So let's even add the county on top of it. We're still not anywhere close to what they're getting year over year. And that $500 million number, that's for a biennium. So it's 2 years. Remember, Wyoming budgets every 2 years, or at least we're supposed to. But still, that is an extraordinary amount of money. And it's... I want to know where it all goes.
That's only one portion of their income as well.
Yeah. I mean, so, the question of, hey, do you think we give you enough money? I mean, and basically he said, oh, we're very grateful. Well, I hope you are. But anyway, I think it was a good interview. And again, I'd like to thank President Seidel and Mike Smith for coming on the program and visiting with us. It's not every day you get to interview the president of the university and have him in studio. So I think that was pretty good. Well, we'll go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we'll finish up the show. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. And now, Cowboy State Politics Live is syndicated on the OBBM network. That's available on Roku, Apple TV, and a whole bunch of other places. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics live every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Donald Trump's reaction to Nancy Pelosi not seeking re-election. It's a great thing for America. I couldn't agree more. Nancy Pelosi has been one of the most destructive forces in maybe in our nation's history. But, I mean, all of the really terrible crap that she's pushed through Congress, it is a great thing for America. In fact, Ken, I've got a soundbite from Donald Trump says, "We stand for freedom." Go ahead and play that one.
Our opponents are offering an economic nightmare. We're delivering an economic miracle. We have delivered in 9 months. This is the biggest investment of funds in a country in history by many times. That's good. They want higher spending for government and illegal aliens. We want bigger paychecks for American workers and American families, and that's what we're delivering. You see that. They stand for crime and chaos and corruption. We stand for law and order and justice. Also, strong borders. Boy, do we have strong borders. They put America last. We put America first. We put America first.
Not Nancy Pelosi.
And as long as I'm in the White House, the United States is not going communist in any way, shape, or form. We'll stop it. We're going to stop it. Stop this nonsense.
I think you just let New York suffer the consequences of electing that guy, because they're going to. I mean, there's no question about it. And so, anyway, I'm kind of excited to see, what New York turns into. I mean, you're going to have a perfect example of what communism does to our free enterprise system, which, I mean, it's going to, in New York, it's probably going to stop it dead in its tracks. But, one good thing is Mom Donnie does have to put up with the legislature in Albany, though it's packed with a bunch of radicals too, so you never know what's going to happen. What I can tell you is happening on the national stage. Well, I guess it's on the national stage too, but I just looked to see maybe if the Senate has voted on the government shutdown. I kind of thought that maybe after the election that the Democrats would acquiesce and vote to open up the government. But so far, they haven't done that. And it's too bad, too, because from ABC News, the Department of Transportation might be forced to shut down some airspace this week because they're not paying air traffic controllers, and it might be kind of a problem if planes start colliding with one another. And I quote from ABC News. DOT might be forced to shut down some airspace this week. Secretary Duffy said that 50% of all major air traffic control facilities face staffing shortages, according to the FAA. Air traffic controllers are required to work without pay for the duration of the shutdown. How do you think that's going to work? Think that's going to be a good thing?
It baffles me how we decide what's essential. Back in they had the strike when Reagan was there.
Yeah.
And he just fired them and said,
we'll hire other people.
Yeah. You would think that that's one of the pivotal things, key things that we would keep going, but
nope. Apparently, well, so far up to this 10 seconds, the Democrats have decided that air travel is not all that important. I wonder if they'll change their mind if it becomes difficult for them to get from D.C. back home. Because that every weekend they're flying home to be with their families and their radical constituents that put them there. So I wonder if that's going to change their mind a little bit. Maybe if they had to drive wherever they went, that might change things. Back to the piece. Quote, so if you bring us to a week from today, Democrats, you'll see mass chaos. You'll see mass flight delays, you'll see mass cancellations, and you may see up close certain parts of the airspace because we just can't manage it because we don't have air traffic controllers because they're not being paid. And I learned one of my first lessons in I don't know if it was my first job, but I know it was an early lesson, man. You don't work if you don't get a paycheck. And if that paycheck is going to be late, well, then you're off until the paycheck shows up. And you can't expect people to work out of the goodness of their heart, especially when airplanes. And here's the other thing: even if people are working for no pay, why would you do a good job? You know that you're not getting paid. You know that your performance, your paycheck is not dependent upon your performance, and so why would you do a good job? I think it's probably far more dangerous to have air traffic controllers that are not being paid, that are manning their posts, because they're kind of disinterested, right? There's no reason for them to work if they're not going to get paid. But another place in our country that we have kind of not been paying attention to because we've been watching the communists in New York and Minnesota is what's happening at the Supreme Court. From the Federalist, here's what to watch for as SCOTUS weighs the Trump's emergency tariff powers, and I quote. Following an action-packed overseas trip to Asia last week, President Donald Trump is gearing up to tackle the next challenge facing his administration, a legal battle over his tariff policy. On Wednesday, the U.S. Supreme Court, so yesterday, would hold oral arguments in a pair of consolidated cases known as Learning Resources Incorporated versus Trump and Trump versus VOS Selections Incorporated. The Federalist Society previously reported, or the Federalist previously reported, that these cases specifically center around the legality of Trump's use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose tariffs on goods from foreign nations making their way into the United States. Enacted in 1977, the IEEPA grants the president the power to, quote, deal with any unusual or extraordinary threat which has its source in whole or substantial part of outside the United States to the national security, foreign policy, or economy of the U.S., if the president declares a national emergency with respect to such threat. The Supreme Court will address the question of whether Trump's invocation of tariffs under the statute's existing provisions is lawful. It really feels like this is a coin flip in terms of the outcome, Heritage Foundation chief economist E.J. Antoni told the Federalist. Quote, not only am I uncertain of how the justices are going to interpret the law, but I'm also uncertain on how they're going to interpret the economic situation because there are competing economic theories here. I think it could go either way. Well, I can tell you how some of the justices on the Supreme Court are going to rule. The normally liberal justices are probably going to rule against President Trump. The question is, what is Amy Coney Barrett, Neil Gorsuch, and Brett Kavanaugh going to do? We know what Clarence Thomas is going to do. I mean, that one's pretty easy. He's probably going to side with the president, though, I mean, on occasion. I mean, he is a strict originalist, and so, or he calls it a, what does he call it? A structuralist is what he calls it. Same, different birds of the same species. But anyway, the president has to have the authority to manage trade because if you leave that authority up to Congress, it will never happen. And even if it does happen, it's not going to happen quickly. When you're talking about trade, sometimes there are decisions that have to be made quickly. Like if you're in a negotiation, the president has to be able to say, okay, well, we're going to have a tariff on you then. You can't have, I mean, you don't have time to pick up the phone and say, hey, John Thune, we need tariffs. It doesn't make any sense, and it's not going to work. The president has to have the ability to, conduct trade with other countries. That seems to be, and again, I'm not a Supreme Court justice, nor do I play one on the radio, but it just makes sense to me that the executive has to have that ability. Similarly, the president has the ability to handle other, foreign affairs, militarily or otherwise. So why would this one not extend there? And it's, it's an interesting case because it's the constant tug and pull between the executive and the legislative branch. And we're seeing in Wyoming, we're seeing some of that right now. We have a a governor who has, I would argue, consolidated a ton of power in the governor's mansion. And just constitutionally, he has a lot of power anyway. Like all of these boards that run everything around the state, yeah, the governor picks them. The Supreme Court, it's the governor. I mean, the Attorney General, it's the governor. Filling replacements at the state level, it's the governor. So the governor has an extraordinary amount of power. And some of the things that we've seen come out of the legislature is an attempt to claw back some of that executive authority to the legislative branch. And I think where you're seeing a lot of that is there was an attempt last session, Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, but an attempt to claw back some of the governor's energy matching funds. That he's got this giant pool of money. I think it's $400 million. It's a big pot of money, and the legislature, the bill didn't pass. But anyway, there was an attempt to pull back some of that money and say the governor doesn't need to have the authority over that, those funds. It's the House of Representatives that have the purse strings, and all funding has to start in that chamber. And if you're going to spend money, you got to go through the legislature. But again, this is a constant tug and pull between the branches of government. And don't leave out the Supreme Court. I mean, they are a co-equal branch of government, and so they have a part to play in this. But one of the justices on the Supreme Court, actually, she does have some interesting ties to a former professor here in Sheridan, Ketanji Brown Jackson. One of her professors actually lives in Sheridan. From the Federalist. Justice Jackson is the Supreme Court's mean girl. And I quote, that appears to be the key question plaguing the U.S. Supreme Court, to negotiate in good faith or to go scorched earth. Liberal justices, as they strategize on how best to lose in key cases that come before the bench, are arguing over this very question, or at least struggling with this very question. Published Friday by the New York Times lackey Jodi Kantor, an extensive expose features claims from anonymous confidants and associates of the justices about an alleged ongoing dispute among the court's Democratic appointees. This friction, according to these unnamed individuals, centers on the justices' differing views on how to effectively navigate the court's current makeup and dominating originalist jurisprudence, or in other words, the conservatives. In one camp are Sonia Sotomayor and Allegra Kagan, both of whom have sought to establish cordial relationships with their Republican colleagues. The article specifically homes in on Kagan and how she has strategically sought to find areas of compromise with her colleagues, namely Chief Justice Roberts and Associate Justice Amy Coney Barrett, to try and narrow the scope of a ruling or, on rare occasions, produce a left-wing victory in any given case. Thankfully, those are few and far between. However, enter Ketanji Brown Jackson. According to other sources who spoke with the Times, it is Justice Jackson's public remarks and penchant for using antagonistic language in her dissents that are purportedly irking Kagan. Admirers of Justice Kagan say that she's prudent to show restraint. But in the opinions that have been written by Ketanji Brown Jackson, some of them are humorous, but some of them are, let's just say kind of biting. Take this one, for example. Quote, this is Calvin Ball jurisprudence with a twist, Ketanji Brown Jackson wrote. Calvin Ball only has one rule. There are no fixed rules. We seem to have two. That one and the administration always wins. So now that one, it may sound like that insult isn't all that biting. But it is if you're a member of the Supreme Court and you're being accused of always siding with Donald Trump. I mean, it's injecting politics into, and you can't get away from politics in anything, really. Though I don't like to quote Alan Simpson, I seem to be quoting him more often than not these days. But everything is politics. Except for politics, that's personal. And so while the court tries to keep politics out of its decisions, I mean, to a large degree, there's no way that you can. There's been attempts to sway justices either way. Who can forget Chuck U. Schumer on the steps of the Supreme Court saying that Gorsuch was going to, quote, reap the whirlwind? for his decision. So politics always influences Supreme Court decisions. And it's just this time with Ketanji Brown Jackson, the DEI hire on the Supreme Court, that we've taken the discussion down a level. Instead of reasoned approaches, maybe we're inserting things like Calvin Ball into opinions, quoting a cartoon, which might be the extent of Ketanji Brown Jackson's intellect. I'm not sure. I mean, after all, it was Joe Biden that said, I'm going to hire a black woman. All right, maybe we should focus on her qualifications first, but anyway, I don't know that I necessarily agree with this entire article because Justice Thomas has a reputation for writing some pretty biting opinions of his own. He's pretty direct in his dissents, especially when, he's pretty ticked off about a ruling. So I don't know. I mean, I think that Ketanji Brown Jackson is a DEI hire, and I don't think there's any way that you're going to get around that. But she's on there for life. Thank you, Joe Biden. Been a while since we talked about the economy directly. Here's a piece from, let's see, I think it was ABC News. But IBM is cutting thousands of jobs in the fourth quarter. And I quote, in the fourth quarter, we are executing an action that will impact a low single-digit percentage of our global workforce. Low single-digit percentages for a company as large as IBM equates to thousands. Okay, we're not talking about a company that has 30 employees and they're cutting one or two. This is thousands. Quote, while this may impact some U.S.-based roles, we anticipate that our U.S. employment will remain flat year over year. IBM employed 270,000 people at the end of 2024, according to the last report. A 1% cut to headcount would result in 2,700 jobs being lost or being laid off. Our technology companies have been slimming down lately, with executives looking for ways to improve productivity by increasing reliance on artificial intelligence. It was last month that I brought you the story of Amazon saying that they're going to cut 14,000 corporate employees, while Meta, Facebook, is said to cut 600. In October 22nd, IBM delivered stronger earnings than expected, thanks to a 10% jump in the revenue. So this trend is only going to continue. There are so many tasks that can be managed with AI now, and it's actually pretty incredible. I mean, there's lots of examples where you don't necessarily need a person to, route shipments. Yeah, you got to have a person that packs all the stuff. But in the sense of, in the case of just routing shipments wherever, I mean, you can have a computer do that. Though, I would argue that there's nothing that beats a human touch, though. A lot of technology does things a lot faster than humans can do. And with our push to focus on AI, this trend is only going to continue. The question is, what are all those people that don't have a job anymore? What are they going to do? I would suggest that they go into workforces such as plumbing or the trades. But I mean, what else? What other choice do you have, right? If your career no longer exists, you have a couple of choices. You can go back to school and get training in some other area, or you're going to have to go, I don't know, dig a ditch somewhere. Everybody can run a shovel.
What was it that Biden said? Let them write code?
Yeah. The coal miners in West Virginia. Just let them write code. Somewhere I've got that sound bite. And that's the attitude of politicians. But, he's not all that far off, because those people, and even writing code now, that's kind of going by the wayside too. There's AI that can write its own code. The app I've been telling you about, a lot of it was written through AI. So, we're going to be seeing some increasing job losses due to AI. And the real question is, what are those people going to do for employment? They're either going to have to go back to school, get some other training, or they're going to have to go take up an unskilled labor job. But even so, those companies are going to have to be hiring people. And, and I reject the claim that there aren't jobs available for just about everybody that wants one. Just about everywhere you go has got a help wanted sign. Some businesses, I think, just kind of leave those signs up perpetually. They're always hiring, or, at the very least, they want, if a new employee comes along that is a good one, they'll hire them. Anyway, I mean, it's one of those things. As technology advances, you're going to have to deal with employment.
So you're a Star Trek fan.
I am.
We've established that several
Over and
times.
over.
I always wondered when I watched that about the economy and about how individuals were paid.
They didn't have to be paid.
Yeah, and that's the point that I'm getting to, is everything they need is right there, except initiative.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the flaws with that picture of society, is people need work.
Yes.
People need...
You have to do something.
People need to have a purpose in life. And we take away all of these other things. Maybe someday that underwater basket weaving degree will be worth something, because
maybe not the gender studies degree, but basket weaving, perhaps. Well, and that's a good point too. The way that they solved that problem in Star Trek is kind of, absolutely artificial. But the argument was, well, people are free to pursue whatever they want to pursue, and we'll have people do all the work because they like to do it. Well, if there's no money, how do you get people to do hard labor and build ships and stuff? We'll do it all automatically. And people are free to paint or write books. Or, well, what if the AI could write your book for you? Have you seen the same ads, Ken, where there's AI being advertised that they'll write your book for you? Have you seen any of those? Why even write a book if you're going to have AI do it? I guess to make money. But I can't imagine that we're talking about a great work of fiction or even a great biography if you have AI writing. The last time I asked AI to do a review of me, it said I've been, heavily invested in journalism since 1986, which, maybe I started listening to Rush pretty early, but as far as journalism, I really didn't start doing that until much later. Point being is that AI makes mistakes, and I've read some reports that sometimes intentionally so, that some AI models are deceptive, and that they have kind of become, and this is a terrifying prospect for me, but they've become self-protective. That I read one article where I don't remember which AI model it was, but the AI was told to turn itself off, and it lied. That it said, okay, yep, I'm turning myself off, and then it didn't, and everything was still running. And so, there is a whole nother question. When does AI start making independent decisions? And is it even possible for AI to make independent decisions? Obviously, make decisions based on logic, right? A plus B equals C. So, they could make those decisions, but still at that point, it's still input versus output. But I am really, really kind of terrified about what's going to happen to our world when AI runs a whole bunch of it. There is no machine that has ever been created that can exceed the creativity of the human mind, I don't think. And if there is one that is going to be created, then that is a world that I'm kind of scared to live in, because creativity is something, up until now anyway. Creativity has been something that is inherently human. That you can't invent a machine that has an imagination, that can create things out of thin air. And if even that is the case, what happens with innovation? Do all things become possible all at once? Or what happens if you don't have, the inventor that sits around and says, "Man, I think I could build that." These are large philosophic questions that I don't know that the folks that are creating these AI models have actually dealt into. All right, my friends, we've pretty much burned up another busy broadcast program. We're a little bit early, but Ken and I have got some things to do, so we're going to take off a few minutes early. Tomorrow we'll be back in the home studio, and so I'll see you tomorrow. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. Have a good afternoon, my friends.